Cuphead, one of my favorite games of 2017, is arriving in its new form, this time on Nintendo Switch, and this is a very unexpected situation indeed. What was once a Microsoft exclusive is now appearing on a Nintendo machine, something we haven't seen since the old Game Boy Advance days, I suppose. There's a lot to discuss here, and this is an interesting port, and to do that I'm joined by my friend and colleague Richard Ledbetter.
Hey John, well this is a turn up for the books, isn't it?
Yes, if you asked me at the start of 2019 what we would see this year on Switch, this is one of the last things I would have guessed, but here we are.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually the perfect match for the hardware, I think. I mean, I'm assuming footage is playing out as we speak, and it just looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely amazing game on Switch, and also I'm very happy that it's finally getting a physical release a bit later down the line, which is something I've wanted for a long time. But it makes for an interesting port, and on the surface this could essentially be the first time we've seen a Switch port that is visually identical to a version of a game on a much more powerful platform. This looks exactly the same as it does on Xbox. There just isn't any difference. And a lot of that obviously comes down to the art design. The art is created as it is, and that has been translated perfectly to Switch. And so, you are effectively getting 1080p and docked 720p native on the screen, but the soft nature of the artwork basically means you're not going to see any pixels, pixelation, aliasing. It's perfectly smooth.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back to your original analysis back in the day, you actually compared on PC 720p, I think it was, to 1440p, and you just couldn't tell the difference whatsoever, simply because of the nature of the artwork. This is 2D hand-drawn stuff. In fact, wasn't the default, the original setting, 720p?
That's right, yes, exactly. So in that sense, this type of art is not pixel art, so the edges are very soft and smooth, and there's a lot of additional post-processing and chromatic aberration used to sort of give it that old-timey cartoon look, and it works brilliantly. And honestly, you can see here, it looks really, really nice on a portable screen as well. Something that obviously would have been possible with the PC version and a laptop, but just having it on a dedicated console now like this, it's great to see.
Well, this is pretty great because back in the day I played this on a Dell XPS 13 using Intel integrated graphics, and it works like a dream. So obviously the technical, the hardware footprint of the game is fairly minimal, which again, makes this a perfect match for the Switch. And of course there's the art style as well. I mean, I'm guessing, well, there is some evidence of 3D elements in there, very slight, I think, we noticed in a couple of stages in the original game, but for the most part it's all down to the quality of that 2D artwork, which just looks amazing and which transitions across to the Switch beautifully.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind though, and this speaks to the great work done by the developers, just because it's a 2D game doesn't mean you're going to get flawless performance. This is a Unity game, and we've seen other, even 2D pixel art style Unity games released over the years that just didn't run well. I mean, that's just, obviously there's stuff like Broforce, a very different kind of game, of course, and there's some others as well, and they don't run well. So it's not a given that you're going to get great performance, but obviously the development team on this has done a wonderful job optimizing the game. Runs great on Xbox, the stuttering I mentioned in the Windows version is fixed, and, well, on Switch, it runs quite well. So I guess the first thing to mention then is the loading times. When it first launched on Xbox, this was actually the one complaint I had of the game. The loading times were really long for a game of this style, often going way over 20 seconds, I'd say, to load most battles. But since then it's been patched and Xbox One X was released. And since X has higher bandwidth on the hard drive and a faster CPU for asset decompression, you would expect faster loading then. It also probably takes advantage of the Xbox One X's hardware cache. So when I first loaded it up on Xbox, I got this, which is still like a little over 16 seconds of loading to load up this stage, which isn't great, but I went back and tried loading it again from the map, and it was much faster. So I even went so far as to restart the game, go from the main menu to the island, and then load that stage, and while it was a tiny bit slower, it was still much, much faster than the first time. So it basically seems if you use an Xbox One X, you get faster loading all around, thanks probably due to a combination of the patch plus the X's hardware cache. But if we jump back over to Xbox One S, where I first played it, it's still a huge improvement over the launch version. It's not quite as fast as Xbox One X, but yeah, it's much, much better than it was at launch. On Switch then, the results are also very good. It's much, much faster than it was on Xbox when it first launched, but it's not as fast as Xbox in its current state when it's performing its best. So yeah, you can see then it basically comes in a little over 9 seconds or so, which is quite reasonable, I would say. I guess it's also worth mentioning the file size difference. The game comes in to be a little over 11 gigabytes, but on Switch it's 3.3 gigabytes. And so there's two things about that. One, it's obviously more compressed, and so that would probably explain why the loading is a little bit longer. We've seen that before with some other Switch games. It's kind of a common thing. And I also kind of think that maybe they got it down to 3.3 gigabytes because they are planning a physical Switch version. And this allows them to release on a 4 gigabyte card, making this a cheaper release. So yeah, there's some good work there, but there is no visual evidence of any sort of like loss in quality or anything here. I mean, it really does look the same.
So it couldn't be FMV movies or anything like that?
There's really nothing like that in there. I mean, most of the movies, most of the cutscenes in the game, it's just sort of artwork similar to what you see during the normal gameplay with text boxes. So it's not anything like that. And the sound, of course, is definitely on par with the original as well.
Here's a real high-class bout. You're up.
So this might seem like a bit of a pointless endeavour, but how does the performance stack up overall? The original 60 frames per second, locked.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. I played through about roughly half of the game stages during my time with the Switch version so far, and I'll probably finish it again because it's a great game. And yeah, it just you get a very smooth, stable 60 frames per second, even in the hectic scenes, like this boss fight here with all the feathers flying everywhere and the bullets. That's the kind of thing that could dip performance, and it doesn't occur, so that's good. But I did notice a very strange thing in a couple instances, and it's not even something I'm able to measure with the frame rate graph due to the nature of it. So at one of the bosses, I retried a couple times, and then on one of the retries, it started to exhibit what appeared like a bit of judder, and that was strange. So I took note of it, and I went back and I checked the data on our frame rate tool, and it was still reporting 60 frames per second. So going through frame by frame, it actually shows that there was something strange with the way it was updating the sprites for that specific run. So it didn't look as smooth as it should, even though it was still 60 frames per second, and I'm not sure what was up with that. It only happened, 2 or 3 times, and only on a retry, and after you retry again, it fixed itself right up. So it's a tiny, weird little bug that is strange. I can't explain why that's happening, but it's something I noticed. But other than that, though, it is a locked 60 FPS, just like every other version of the game. And all of this also applies to the portable mode, which turns in the same perfect, solid 60 frames per second frame rate that we see in docked mode. We've encountered games before where portable mode ran better or worse and vice versa than the docked mode. Sometimes there is a differential there, especially with the different clock speeds that developers have access to. But yeah, in this case, I'm not sure whether it's clocked at the lower speed or not, but the end result is completely locked 60 FPS. That said, I do want to mention this real quick. So, one of the things about this game is that there's like a stutter effect used during parries, and then also certain attacks use this similar technique. And this can actually manifest as slowdown here. As you can see on the graph here, it looks like it's slowing down, but that's not really the case. This is an intentional thing related to the animation. If you look at the Xbox One version, we see exactly the same thing. So yeah, it's exactly the same kind of thing between the two. So this is really just part and parcel with the design of the game, but really in terms of technical performance from the engine, it does indeed run at 60 frames per second, locked on both Xbox One and on the Switch.
I think the novelty for this one is that for the first time on a console, you'll be able to play it on the go anywhere you want, and to do so seemingly with a complete lack of compromise whatsoever. So that's pretty awesome, right? And there are no compromises, right? Still locked 60 frames per second in mobile mode.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just due to the nature of the game, this is the first time we can say that there really is no compromise coming from the original version to the Switch. It's a perfect port, if you will. Which is
That's
great.
Pretty awesome. Yeah, because this adds an extra dimension to the package, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and it's great that Switch owners can experience it as well, because, like I said, this was absolutely one of my favorite games of 2017. It's a really great homage to classic sort of run and gun shooters, similar to something, like, it's a little bit like Gunstar Heroes meets Alien Soldier. It's heavily focused on the boss run mechanics, but there's still some run and gun stages in there as well. A lot of pattern recognition, but the key is that it has very tight controls with low latency, which lag in 2D Unity games is something that I've encountered quite often, annoyingly, but it's not a problem here. It's very, very crisp and responsive. And then, everything just plays out great. It looks great. The soundtrack is excellent. It really is a wonderful game, and it's an interesting sort of beginning to this relationship, I guess, with Microsoft and Nintendo, which, I definitely don't think we're ever going to be seeing Cuphead on a PlayStation, but it does seem like Nintendo and Microsoft have sort of come to, I don't know, some sort of agreement, or it's interesting. Like, they view each other as like we're competing, but not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the demographic of the Switch user base is probably either different to Xbox, or there's a lot of crossover, because fundamentally the devices do two different things really. But there is that kind of sweet spot in the middle where titles like Cuphead will transition pretty much perfectly onto the Switch, and at the same time, as we saw last week with Hellblade, they can do a pretty decent job of bringing even a game using a top tier engine over to the Switch, and it still may not be quite as good, but it still is worth the effort, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with this relationship, I have to wonder if we'll ever see something like Sea of Thieves, for instance, on the Switch, which I'm sure that would take a pretty significant hit to the visual quality, but based on what we've seen with Unreal Engine 4 and the Switch, stuff like Hellblade, it does at least seem feasible. And I have to admit, it would be great to be able to do cross-platform play between Switches and the Xbox. That makes for some nice, easy multiplayer that would be very appealing, I think.
Yeah, I guess it saves Microsoft the bother of having to launch a mobile Xbox if they can just partner up with Nintendo.
Absolutely, if you just bring the Xbox platform over to Switch as well, in a way, that's not a bad thing, and it kind of benefits everyone, I'd say.
Yeah, good stuff. So, final notes. Any final takeaways?
Nope, this is a great port. If you haven't played Cuphead, or if you want to play it again, or if you just want to own a physical copy, it seems like this is going to be a great way to play the game, and I've absolutely loving it once again, so definitely check it out. But I think that's pretty much it for now. So yes, if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Click that notification button there at the top to receive all the latest updates from Digital Foundry. And if you want to chat about Cuphead or anything else really, come find us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is Rich and John signing off.